Welcome to The Explainer. Today we are diving headfirst into the magical, sometimes totally illogical, and just utterly fascinating mind of a preschooler.
Have you ever really thought about that? It's this amazing paradox, right? They can build entire universes in their head, but something as simple as pouring juice from one glass to another, it completely trips them up. It really shows you a world where imagination is just boundless, but logic? Well, logic plays by some very different rules.
So to really get to the bottom of this, we've got to look at what's basically a great debate between two absolute giants of psychology. And trust me, this isn't just some dusty old academic argument. Their ideas are still shaping how we teach and parent right now, today. They give us an amazing window into what's really happening in those busy little brains.
All right, first up in the ring, we have the legend himself, Jean Piaget. Now, his whole thing was that kids aren't just empty buckets waiting for us to pour knowledge into them. Nope. He saw them as curious little scientists, lone explorers who are actively, constantly figuring out the world all on their own.
Piaget called this special time the pre-operational stage. And that little word pre is super important. It means before logical operations. So it's this period of incredible growth and amazing cognitive leaps, but it also comes with some very specific and pretty predictable limitations.
So what's the big upgrade during this stage? It's something called symbolic representation. Honestly, it's like a superpower. It's what lets a banana suddenly become a telephone, or a boring cardboard box transform into a spaceship. This single ability is the engine that fuels this massive explosion in language, in drawing, and of course in that amazing, complex, cooperative pretend play that we see.
Okay, but here's where we bump up against the limits of their logic. And there's no better way to see it than with Piaget's famous tests of conservation. Now, conservation is just a fancy word for understanding that even if something looks different, its basic properties, like how much of it there is, haven't actually changed.
Okay, so picture this. You take two identical, short, wide glasses. You pour the exact same amount of milk into each one. You put them in front of a preschooler and you ask, do these have the same amount of milk? And they will look you right in the eye and confidently say, yup, same.
But then, you do something super simple right in front of their eyes. You just pour the milk from one of those short glasses into a tall, skinny one. Now you ask the same question. Which glass has more milk? And I'm telling you, almost every single time, they will point right to that tall glass and say, that one.
So what is going on here? Why do they get it wrong? Well, Piaget pinpointed a few things. First, their brain gets fixated or centrates on just one obvious dimension, the height. They see the milk as taller, and they completely ignore that the glass is way skinnier. They also can't do what he called reversibility. They can't mentally pour that milk back into the original glass to see it would be the same. So for them, it's simple. What looks like more is more. End of story.
You know, this same kind of thinking explains another classic preschooler move, egocentrism. And that's just a term for how hard it is for them to see the world from someone else's point of view. It's literally why they can be in a completely different room, yell, "Hey, what's this?" and be genuinely baffled when you have no idea what this is. In their mind, if they can see it, of course you can too.
But what if that's not the whole story? What if it's not all about the lone scientist? Enter another brilliant thinker, Lev Vygotsky. He came along with a totally different idea. He said, wait a minute, learning isn't a solo mission, it's a social one.
Yeah, so for Vygotsky, a kid isn't so much a scientist as a social apprentice. He argued that development isn't about focusing on what a child can't do, it's about what they can build with a little help and guidance from the people around them. You know, parents, teachers, even their friends.
And this leads to Vygotsky's biggest, most powerful idea, the zone of proximal development. Just think of it as the Goldilocks zone for learning. It's that perfect sweet spot, not too hard, not too easy. It's the gap between what a child can already do all by themselves and what they can achieve with just a little bit of help.
So how do we help them in that zone? We use something called scaffolding, and it's a perfect name for it, right? Just like on a building, it's temporary support that you take away when it's no longer needed. The goal is to give just enough help so they don't get frustrated and give up, but not so much that they get bored. It's really the art of giving hints, not handing them the answer.
Okay, and what about that thing where you see a kid talking to themselves while they're building Legos or doing a puzzle? Piaget kind of dismissed that as just more egocentrism, but Vygotsky had this absolutely brilliant insight. He said, no, that's not just noise, that's a tool. It's them thinking out loud. It's how they guide their attention, plan their next move, and work through problems. And eventually,
That out-loud chatter goes quiet and becomes our inner voice. Okay, so Piaget's little scientist versus Vygotsky's social apprentice. Who was right? Who won the great debate? Well, as it turns out, modern science and neuroscience give us a much more complete picture.
So here's the update. We now know that Piaget, as brilliant as his observations were, probably underestimated what kids are capable of. It turns out, if you simplify his tasks just a little bit, preschoolers make way fewer mistakes. And we also see that development isn't so much like climbing a rigid set of stairs, one stage at a time. It's a lot more like walking up a slow, steady, and sometimes kind of bumpy ramp. And to really get a feel for this more gradual development, let's zoom in on one of the most crucial mental skills that has to mature: their attention span. And wow, look at this. This graph really shows you the dramatic improvement. So in one study, researchers tracked how long kids could stay focused on a puppet show. And you can see at 2.5, they're looking away about a quarter of the time, they're easily distracted. But jump ahead to 4.5, and their focused attention has more than doubled. That ability to just tune everything else out and focus, it's a muscle, and it gets so much stronger in these years. And remember Piaget's egocentrism? Well, the modern way we think about that is the development of something called theory of mind. And this is a huge, monumental leap. It's when a child finally realizes that other people have their own thoughts, their own feelings, their own beliefs that are completely separate from their own. I mean, this is the foundation for everything, for empathy, for telling a little white lie, for every complex social interaction we have. Okay, so why does all this theory matter in the real world? Well, it matters a lot, because these ideas directly shape how we teach our kids and how we parent them every single day. They're not just abstract concepts, they're basically blueprints for how to build a great learning environment. You can see Piaget's legacy everywhere in things like hands-on, discovery learning. Think of a Montessori classroom, where kids learn by doing. And you can see Vygotsky's influence in things like collaborative buddy systems for reading, group projects where kids with different abilities work together, and anytime a teacher says, hey, try talking it out to solve a tough problem. So in the end, it was never really about Piaget versus Vygotsky. It's not about who won. It's about recognizing that kids are both of these things at once. They are little scientists making their own amazing discoveries, and they are social apprentices, learning from absolutely everyone around them. The real magic happens when we can use both of their toolkits to help a child build their own unique mind. So here's a thought for you. The next time you see a preschooler totally lost in their world of play, what's one thing you'll look for now?